Great to see you. We've met you many times this year at various events, at the fundraiser for the Vega campaign. It has been quite the journey this campaign season. We became acquainted with your organization through Jose Vega after his intervention against AOC went viral.
You're a coward! You're a progressive socialist! Where are you against the war mobilization? He's telling the right truth! You have done nothing!
Since then, we've seen quite a few other members of the LaRouche organization do similar types of interventions. We've seen Kynan do interventions.
Congressman, I think the only thing we need to discuss here today is a need for a ceasefire in Gaza. Okay? November marks the killing of Yitzhak Rabin, who sought peace between Israel and Palestine. He said that if you wish for peace, it has to be through economic progress. He said that you don't get security with a tank or a helicopter or with weapons. You get it with hope. You get it with education.
Robert do interventions.
Sorry.
You have a chance. Well, I'm not sorry. You sit down.
I know you're
we're
not sorry. That's the point. The hypocrisy of this speech. The hypocrisy of the fact that what do you have? Can you please make a statement about President Joe Biden's speech? This is a clearly warmongering speech. President Joe Biden is calling for $100 billion of funding for Israel, Taiwan, and Ukraine, and we're supposed to just bundle these together and pretend like we're going to rush to World War III, and we're all just going to let Hillary Rodham Clinton sit here. Okay.
I'm sorry.
We've even seen you get dragged out of Radio City Music Hall at the big Obama-Biden fundraiser earlier this year. So was this style of intervention and disruptive protest, was this part of the MO of you guys before Jose, or did he kind of pioneer that? And as a B part to that, how have these interventions become a staple of your activism, not just with Jose, but amongst the whole group there?
Yes, they were actually a staple of the LaRouche movement. When I was a young organizer, I remember being absolutely terrified going to some kind of Malthusian genocidal something meeting in Maryland. And it was only about 25 people talking about how we had to halt population growth and get the planet's population down to 1 billion people or something like that. And I began yelling. And it was small, so I just shut down the whole meeting, which was very exciting. You have a certain sense of power, but I was also really naive, so I didn't realize that the nice man who wanted to take me and a colleague out for coffee afterwards was just trying to really profile us and find out who we were. And, but it is, it's one voice of power to be able to get the truth out. And now with so much control over the media, the social media, the algorithms, the censoring, the control of the whole electoral process, which is outrageous, it has become a really important means of not only getting your message out, but I think it's a dialogue, it's a drama. It has the effect like the civil rights movement, when people saw the photograph of the 6-year-old girl handcuffed to a chain link fence in Alabama. And then everyone is kind of outraged by it, because if you look at the comments on Jose's interventions or other, you see so many of the commenters who are saying, look at the audience. Why is the audience going along with that?
Right.
And of course, that's beautiful, because we want people to become self-conscious. Why am I going along with this? Why am I going along with these horrible policies? And in the last intervention Jose did, I just got such a kick out of the guy with Fred on his T-shirt who kept running around with his trying to block Jose from filming.
I had that experience when I intervened on what we have come to call the cowbell libs. They were jumping around, trying to block my camera. That's what they do.
Yeah.
All right. So you're running with the backing of the LaRouche organization, which you joined in 1988. You were a music student at the time. Right. So you've been with them for a very long time.
Yeah.
I think of any group in the independent politics space, there is the least understanding of what that organization is, what it's about, what the beliefs are. Some people call it a left organization. Some people say it's a far right organization. Can you demystify the LaRouche organization? What does it represent? What are its beliefs? What are its theories? What are its goals? Because I think a lot of people just don't know, really.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I can demystify it. People have to want to be demystified. So that's the first requisite. And as you both know very well, people make up all kinds of excuses to not act on the right side of history. Oh, that's above my pay grade. I can't understand it. I don't really know what's going on in the Middle East. I'm not going to take sides, that kind of thing. But I will say that LaRouche, who passed away at the age of 96 in 2019, was a genius like Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. He had mastered the work of Leibniz, who was the inventor of the calculus and whose ideas really were very important for the founding of our republic, particularly the conception of the pursuit of happiness. LaRouche had mastered his work by the time he was 14 years old. And I know this because I happened once to be campaigning in New Hampshire, which is where I lived after I left New England Conservatory to organize. And I met someone who had been a classmate of LaRouche, and they said, he was such a pain in the ass. He was correcting the teacher all the time. I mean, just annoyance. So he was a maverick from a very early age. And he describes his first intervention, I guess, in the classroom, because he used to sit at the Boston Navy Yard and watch them building these ports, and observed that in the steel structure, they would cut these circular holes, and that this seemed to actually increase the strength of the steel somehow. And when the geometry teacher said something about, straight lines and LaRouche said, no, I know that's not true. I've been observing this physical principle at the Boston Navy Yard, and picked a huge fight with the teacher in the middle of the classroom when he was in high school. So you can imagine that a lot of people were very annoyed by his actions. He, like myself, was born into a Quaker family in New England. He had a great grandfather who had run a station on the Underground Railroad in Ohio. And then he decided ultimately, after Pearl Harbor was struck, that he would enlist as a medic in the Army in World War II. So he went there. I think he was profoundly affected actually by his time in India in particular. He was actually in Calcutta after the end of the war, and he wasn't there for the horrible bloody massacre, but he saw the street the day after still covered in blood. And he said the Indians of India kept coming up to the American troops saying, can you help us get the British boot off our neck? We want to produce our own finished goods. Can't you help? And he said that was with him when he came back to the United States after the war. So he did work as a management consultant, started teaching economics, not for credit, at Columbia, at the New School, at Swarthmore, recruited a student movement from the so-called left. He had a pen name, Lynn Marcus, and he ran for president the first time in 1976. That was before I was active. I wasn't old enough to vote at that time. But he ran under U.S. Labor Party. And he famously warned that Zbigniew Brzezinski, advising Jimmy Carter, was going to get us in a nuclear war. So that was the beginning of his multiple runs for the presidency. Later, he ran as a Democrat. He warned in 1971 that the impact of Nixon decoupling the dollar from gold would be not only the end of the Bretton Woods system, but he literally said the U.S. was going to go fascist and be involved in a series of perpetual wars. And what he was always doing was designing policies. In 75, he was proposing an international development bank. he wanted to break the back of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. So he met with Indira Gandhi when she was the head of the non-aligned movement, before she was prime minister. He met with Lopez Portillo, the president of Mexico. He got a block of nations in South America to agree they were going to simultaneously declare a debt moratorium and bring the International Monetary Fund to its knees. And Henry Kissinger intervened and sabotaged that, threatening people. Similarly, with a program for a Middle East peace agreement based on greening the deserts, Kissinger personally intervened there too. Kissinger wrote to the head of the FBI, said, get rid of these people, they're getting obnoxious. And finally, in the 1980s, after LaRouche had founded something called the Fusion Energy Foundation and was working to develop fusion energy, he met people working on laser defense from Lawrence Livermore Labs. And he had the conception, why can't we use laser defense to actually eliminate the threat of nuclear weapons? Could we not have an idea where the Soviet Union and the United States simultaneously would make nuclear weapons obsolete by developing a defensive technology, namely lasers? We couldn't do it then, but he said it would be a science driver, like going to the moon. So in 1980, he met Ronald Reagan at a debate in New Hampshire, said to Reagan, I know you're concerned about the danger of nuclear war. Here's my idea. Reagan loved it. When Reagan won, he invited LaRouche to Washington, and LaRouche became Reagan's back channel to the Soviet Union for this proposal. And it wasn't too long after that that 400 FBI agents, U.S. Marshals, surrounded LaRouche's home with the intent to assassinate him, raided LaRouche's headquarters. The government declared his publications all bankrupt. 2 of his associates won major Democratic primaries in Illinois. The media exploded with what you've heard: right-wing extremist, left-wing extremist, anti-Semite, homophobe, racist, steals money from little old ladies, cult leader, just about everything you can think of. So often, I had the experience in the 90s, when people still remembered all this, you'd say LaRouche, and they'd go, oh, there's something bad about him. And you'd say, well, what is it? I don't know. It's just, I just know I've heard bad things. And that was it. And I think they do that to this day, because when they ran that incredible witch hunt where they gave him a 15-year jail sentence on conspiracy to confuse the IRS, crazy charges, and put about a dozen of my associates in prison, they didn't want people to look too hard, say, well, I don't know, where there's smoke, there's fire, and he's a bad guy, and therefore we're not going to worry about it.
I mean, I confuse the IRS every year, but I act alone, so I can't be charged with any sort of conspiracy on that front. But it's funny because, I mean, you mentioned in the 80s, this was when, this all went down, and you joined in 1988, right? So what was it that attracted you to the LaRouche organization at the same time so many people were being sort of pushed away?
I guess it's my Quaker upbringing. I had read John.
Are you still a Quaker?
Not practicing, but, I think it's the closest to what I believe, I guess I would say. John Woolman was 1700s in New Jersey organizing for the end of slavery, and he went to jail all the time. And I heard LaRouche speak, and then I went to a meeting and someone said, he's likely to go to jail. And I said, that's it. This must be the movement I should be with. They're going after this guy. It's probably an unusual response. A lot of people were running in the other direction, but I was trying to do something that would actually make a serious contribution against injustice. And that, in my mind, was actually a compelling reason to join him.
Please clap.